So, aside from the proscenium stage, which you're familiar with somewhat because you've seen it here at the auditorium at Henderson County High School, but it is the most common type. There are other types of theatrical stages. So, in this diagram is an example of a thrust stage. So, if you look at the plaster line runs along the curtain line. The center line is obviously the center of the stage. You'll see that the audience is set up around a staging area. This type of stage is called a thrust stage. A thrust stage has three sets of audience members around a portion of the stage that is thrust out into them. Most commonly, and where you've probably seen it before, it's utilized for musical performances. So, thrust stages are very common at like the Ford Center when bands come in to perform. For musicians, they like the idea that their audience is around them. There are theatrical productions that utilize a thrust stage. In fact, some theaters will set up like at the Preston Arts Center, they've set up on their stage bleacher seating so that mimics a thrust stage, and you can do that. It 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 doesn't mean, and we'll get to this especially with found stages, but just because you have a proscenium style stage, if you have, actors that are walking through the aisles or acting in the aisles, or you move chairs and place them in different locations, you will be utilizing that style uh, uh, of you'll be utilizing those principles, because as you can imagine on a proscenium stage, so if you look at that diagram for a proscenium stage, if you walk up to the plaster line and even over the orchestra pit area, past where the curtain is, when you are facing the audience, everybody in the audience in theory should be able to see you. When you are on a thrust stage and you start walking toward that row that is facing uh, the back of the stage, at some point, as you start to get closer and closer to them, some of the audience will be looking at your back. So that 3/4, 1/4, full front, full half profile look will have to be taken into consideration. That is the amount of your face that is shown to the audience. So we'll get into the principles and theories about these maybe later if we have time, but the general idea is that the thrust stage has three sets of audience members that are sitting around a part of the stage that is thrust into the middle of the house. All right, you're gonna have to help me and use your imagination a little bit. Okay, so remember, I'm on stage right now. All right, over here's the house. It's dark right now, but have some faith in me, that's the house, and those are the doors right there that lead back into the main foyer of the school. Okay, so here's some basic principles that you should know, and I'm gonna walk into the light somewhere. All right, so remember, house is that way. So if I am looking straight at the house, I am full front to the audience. If I turn this way and I'm looking either stage left or stage right, I become profile to the audience. This is often a case used when you're doing dialogue. If I'm looking this way, off center, and we utilize this a lot during dialogue too, you are what they call cheating toward the audience. And I can have a conversation with somebody but still look this way. I am now 3/4 to the audience. Then if I look this way and I'm looking upstage, remember, upstage, downstage, closer to the audience. If I'm looking this way, I am 1/4 to the audience. And then full back is that way, face to the back. That's an easy sort of principle to get you. It's basic. You know how we talked about stage left is based on and stage right is based on the perspective of the actor. How much you are facing the audience, and your blocking, which is your movement on stage, is based on how much the audience can see you, and there's different reasons why you choose different blocking. The next type of stage that you'll see is theater in the round. And as you can imagine, it's a type of theater where audience sits on all sides of you. This is probably maybe the least utilized because, as you can imagine, it's the most difficult to stage because no matter where an actor is looking, they're blocking. Some part of them is facing, their back is facing some part of the audience. So one audience members, and this is what I find most fascinating about this, is that one audience member sitting on one side of the round and another sitting on the other side of the round are going to have two different perspectives of the play. Theater in the round is a difficult type of theater, but some say that it's a more intimate style of theater. The scenery is different. It's probably, I need to double check this, but my guess is that it's probably the most modern type of theater that you often, you wouldn't see this, in Shakespearean time. They'd be all on a stage. It would blow their mind to think that, the audience can sit with you on there. Once again, for another performing arts type of group, musicians use this a lot, and in fact, I'm seeing it more and more for small, intimate shows. That's really focused on the musician. They do a lot of theater in the round. So that's a good principle to go by. So it's a very unique type of theater. It's often associated with intimacy because the audience is so close to the actors in this situation. And it is arguably the most difficult to block and philosophical, I guess, of all the different stagings of a theater. Okay, there's two more that we haven't really talked about, but mentioned one. So let's start with the black box theater. So the black box theater is a weird concept too. This is kind of a modern invention as well in some respects. As I told you when we were going through our theater here at the auditorium, all the walls and stuff were painted black to mimic the idea of a black box theater. And it achieves a feeling like it's a black box theater. But really, a black box theater is like here's how I think about it. A black box theater is a stripped down version of a theater. When I've ever been to black box theaters like in New York City, they may have wings, but they rarely use curtains. Sometimes you can see all the lights, like there's no borders or legs to block anything. They usually don't have wings in a traditional sense. There's usually some type of door that the actors use, or maybe a wall that they walk around. It's a different style, and usually black box shows are just like a theater around. They're more intimate because they're a stripped down version of theater as a whole. And then the other part of the equation is that a lot of experimental and contemporary shows are produced in black box theaters. I saw a very interesting show off Broadway in New York that utilized a black box theater, and the set was half completed like what you'd see here, like you would have set pieces, and the other half of it was digital. And they just had this big wall basically on the back of the set that just extended up into the heavens. That was the backside of their stage. So the black box theater is another type of theater. All right. Lastly, I would classify this as a different type of theater all in its own, and that's the found theater, F-O-U-N-D. So in terms of staging, a found theater may be like a proscenium style, could be like a thrust, could be theater in the round. It could at certain points be all of them combined. A found theater is just what it sounds like. It is not set on a stage in a traditional sense. It's wherever you want it to be. So for instance, I didn't see a production like this, but I had heard my theater teacher in college told me about a production of West Side Story that she saw that was produced in an alleyway. so that they use two different buildings and the fire escapes to tell the story. You can do a found theater in a living room, like when kids, I mean, you all might not have because you were, you had digital things to entertain you, but when you think about like kids that put on like a puppet show, it's kind of a found theater, or where they put on little plays for their parents when they were younger. That's a found theater. Plays outside can be found theaters. And like I said, mentioned the alleyway, or if you perform on a street and you utilize different things to tell your story. In the park, Shakespeare in the Park's a famous one. That's a found theater. Now those may utilize proscenium style stage ideas or theater round, like I said. So it's not that there's one answer for each of those. It's really whatever the production needs are. So for instance, when I produced my play that I wrote out of college, we performed it. It was about John James Audubon, so we performed it in front of the museum at John James Audubon State Park. And we, not in the museum, we were in that garden area out front of it, so the museum was the backdrop, basically. And we built 3 stages, 3 different stages that would become different things during different times in the show. And it was essentially a proscenium style stage, but because we built 3 different stages, one in the center, one off right, and one off left, and the space in between were utilized, we had to do some creative things with the blocking. We could do, he could walk from one building that was stage right, and then meander over to stage left, have interaction in a scene, exit that building, and then go stage left for a different scene. So we were able to, and then we would have people that were around that decorated the town of Henderson during Audubon's time, so that we were able to do some stuff that we couldn't have done, or that would have been, a totally different iteration if we were on a proscenium style stage or anything like that. And, as you can imagine, doing a show outside presents its own challenges, especially since that was a cicada year. So, so found theater presents its own challenges, but arguably can be some of the most creative of the theatrical endeavors. And really, it's whatever you need it to be, whatever you want it to be, whether or not you're in a park, a parking lot, or an alleyway behind a building. You can make theater happen.